Hello! Welcome to Green Bay Botanical Garden. My name is Michael. I'm the education intern, and I'm going to tell you a pretty awesome fact that not a ton of people know, and that is that the garden is beautiful. And while everyone knows it's beautiful during the spring and the summer, it is actually beautiful during the fall and winter as well. We've got blooms that go on well into the autumn months that really look beautiful. Some late blooming flowers and plants, and the fall colors here are absolutely amazing. We've got a lot of maple trees in the area and native trees that just really have stunning fall colors when the cold rolls around. In addition, during the winter, besides our Wisconsin Public Service Garden of Lights, we also have so many other interesting areas in the garden. It's like a whole new world when there's snow on it, and our conifer garden is really just absolutely stunning. So today, we're going to be talking about some trees that stay majestic well into and past the fall. A lot of our trees are deciduous, which means that they lose and drop their leaves as the cold rolls around. But just because a tree drops its leaves doesn't mean that it stops being interesting or beautiful. A lot of other trees have unique features like the shape of the tree, the way it grows, leaves that might stay and persist into the fall, or even just color and texture of things like bark that make that tree really interesting and give it winter interest that's worth looking at and talking about and make it worth planting in a garden or yard. So today we are in the woodland garden of the botanical garden, and we've got a lot of shade-growing trees here, trees that are really good ornamental plants as well as native plants. So they've got a lot of significance, and I really like this garden, especially this time of year. You get a really good view around. It's extremely scenic, and it's really peaceful. Even I come here during the summer and the spring when it's warm because I find this area is really secluded, and it's just a really nice place to refresh myself and just have a break from everything. So we're going to begin walking around. I'm going to show you some awesome trees in this garden that are really interesting and worth looking at, even though they might not have any leaves left. This is just a really peaceful place to be, which is why I love it so much. It's a great day to be out. It's warming up, and I'm happy to be able to look at these trees. There's so many interesting ones in this garden. I won't be able to get to nearly all of them today. But the first one I'd like to show is the common witch hazel. In this tree, I think one of the most interesting things about it is its habit, or the shape of it. It's got this spreading wavy habit. It looks just like almost like a wave crashing over you the way it comes out that's displayed here, and that just has a really great look. This tree is a native, and one of the most unique things about it are its flowers. This is a really late blooming tree. Its flowers will actually start blooming in the fall, and by that time I mean trees are starting to drop their leaves. That makes it extra noticeable to have a tree that has its flowers while it's dropping its leaves, or after. So today you can't really see them, they're kind of gone now. You can get a little bit of a look. They would be a bright green, and unlike a lot of other flowers, the petals of these flowers are like streamers, so they're almost like long ribbon-like, and they have a really unique bright green yellowish color to them that really makes them interesting to see. And another awesome thing about this plant is that it explodes. Don't worry, I'm not in any danger. It's not going to explode and hurt me in any way, but the seed pods of this plant actually have a lot of force, and they rupture and eject their seeds out quite a distance. And it's pretty cool, and it's a great way for the plant to reproduce. So maybe it's not quite an explosion, but it is a big plant pop that their seed pods will actually burst and shoot out the seeds, which is pretty cool. And if you're familiar with skincare at all, you've probably heard of witch hazel. It's used for a lot of skin treatments and face creams and things like that. It's a really good medicinal plant. As well, the fact that it and its flowers smell pretty nice is an extra boost to that. So that is the common witch hazel, and I think the habit and flowers are really beautiful to it. We've got another tree up here that I think is worth checking out. And that is our ironwood. And take a look at this one. It's got some really interestingly textured bark that's kind of peely and flaky. I think it looks a lot like a shagbark hickory, if anyone's ever seen one of those before. And it provides some extra interest with the way that peels off. It has a really nice, appealing look to it. This is a pretty short tree. I believe it gets to be about between 20 and 40 feet. And I bet you can't guess why it is called an ironwood. It's because the wood is so soft and tender. Just kidding. It is extremely hard and durable wood that is used in construction and building. And quite frankly, I would not want to have to be the one to try and cut down or prune any significant limbs off of this tree. It is also called the hop hornbeam because its flowers that grow on these structures called catkins actually resemble hops that people use for brewing. I highly doubt this tree's flowers could be used the same way, but there's a really interesting name behind this plant. So this is the ironwood. Up here, right across the way, you've got a similar tree with another very durable name. We've got the rock elm. Take a look. This bark is extremely deeply furrowed. The ridges are just really prominent, the way that they come out like that. And this one grows to be quite a bit taller. This can be up to about 70 feet. Like the ironwood or hop hornbeam, it is a native tree, so it can be found across our state. And I bet you can't guess why it is called the rock elm. It's because the wood is just extremely soft. No, just kidding. It has extremely durable wood. It is a great tree for construction and building because of its really hard, dense wood. And it actually has some interesting wildlife associations. This plant serves as a host species for the mourning cloak butterfly, as well as the Columbia silk moth. So it's an important species for wildlife. And I've actually seen pictures of the bark when it is taken off of the tree, and it's got beautiful striations of like light and dark. So it's a really interesting, I think it's just a really interesting plant, and the bark is super noticeable from a ways away. So it's got good winter interest, the rock elm. Venturing back down the hill a little bit. And then moving this way, up our trail. This trail is pretty well hidden in the summertime. You almost don't even know it's here with a lot of the foliage, but there's a really nice trail that goes around the whole garden that we're on right now. Next one I'd like to show is the striped maple. And this one, if you can see the bark very well, is really unique. And it's easy to tell why. It has got green bark. Well, the bark is reddish, but it's got lines of green going through it. And that is a really unique feature of the plant. A lot of other plants have green leaves and stems, and I guess the trunk is a stem in a way, but a lot of trees just typically have brown woody stems. This one can actually photosynthesize or get energy, create energy through its stem, which is absolutely awesome. These plants are planted, they don't get too high. The first time I came looking for this plant, I actually didn't even know it was here because it's so small, but it will grow into a tree. And they get to be up to about 30 feet tall. They are native to our state, but really only in a northeast portion of our state. They're actually listed as a tree of special concern by the Wisconsin DNR. And they have so many different names. They're called the striped maple, which is what I know them by. They're also called snake bark maple because their bark kind of looks like a snake. They're called moosewood because mises apparently like to browse on them. They are called the goosefoot maple because their leaves are shaped like the foot of a goose. They're also called the Pennsylvania maple because they apparently grow there. And their wood is porous and apparently not too great for building. So they're called whistle wood because apparently the wood makes really good whistles. And it's just a beautiful, short little plant that grows pretty well in the shade and is really useful. It's actually been used as medicine for breathing and respiratory issues for people. So that is the striped maple. Really, it's hard to get better winter interest in being able to say your tree has some green bark on it. But speaking of colorful bark, you've got another awesome tree here. And this is the yellow birch. Many people are familiar with the paper birch. The paper birch kind of is white. It's got that white dark color, the peely bark on it. This is the yellow birch, and this is the tallest birch species that we have here. And it's got that dark grayish bark in contrast to the paper birch. It's much more of a dark gray color, but if you see when it peels off, it's got that yellow color underneath. It's really beautiful. This is also, another name for it is the swamp birch. I assume that's because it's associated with swampy areas. And it's also, if you look directly at that yellow color, it's got a sheen, kind of a shine to it. It's also called, for that reason, the golden birch. And this plant is used in construction building as well, and it's easily identifiable because it's got a wintergreen scent to the twigs, which I just learned recently. So when you actually break the twigs, you can smell a wintergreen smell. It's really cool. And this plant, kind of like the rock elm, has some interesting wildlife associations. It provides habitat for saw-whet owls, as well as northern flying squirrels, which is super cool. And I'd imagine, like the paper birch, a lot of animals will probably use that peeling bark to build their nests and homes. So this is the yellow birch, or swamp birch, or golden birch, whatever you want to call it. But it's a fantastic species that is definitely worth planting as an ornamental if you'd like to be able to say that you've got a tree with a golden shine underneath its bark. We've got a lot of fantastic natives in our area. I've noticed our American beech up there still has some leaves persisting. You can actually, see another one with leaves persisting too. I don't know if that's the beech, but our beech up there did have some leaves on it. Different trees hold on to their leaves for different amounts of time. Next up, you can see it pretty well from here. I'd love to one day do a whole video on the conifer garden. Like I said, with snow, it is breathtaking. But for today, we're just going to settle on looking at this one. This is the American hemlock, and it's a good ornamental plant. It's got winter interest, for one, just being an evergreen because it holds on to its leaves or needles, but also because it's just got that short cone-like shape, and the leaves are so finely textured compared to a lot of things like the spruces and stuff. It just has really nice, fine little leaves that give it a really elegant texture, and the short shape and kind of tidy look makes for a really good plant. It has been used for food and for tea in the past, so it's got a lot of historical uses to the eastern hemlock. I think there are a lot of fantastic evergreens in our garden, but this is the one that's close enough to really demonstrate, and I was stunned seeing that plant in its really bright green color compared to a lot of our other evergreens that don't get quite that level of bright, vivid green color throughout the season. Next up, we have my absolutely favorite tree in the garden. This is literally my favorite tree in the garden. This is the musclewood, and kind of like the striped maple, its name accurately describes what it looks like. The bark of this tree and the way it forms looks like the muscle of an arm or a leg. It's pretty smooth compared to a lot of other trees too. It's not very furrowed, and I just really like the way that it bends up. It's a short, kind of twisting tree. The branches kind of twist outward towards the top, and it just has such a unique texture and winter interest to it. The wood of this plant is really tough and durable, so much so, and try not to be too confused here, that it is also called the ironwood or the hornbeam. So it is also called the ironwood. You're confused. For now, let's just say that the other plant over there is the ironwood and this is the musclewood. Better way to remember it, but that's an important reason why scientists use Latin names to accurately describe things, because common names can be shared among lots of different stuff. Like plants that might have the word rose in the name but aren't a real rose, or a plant with lily in the name that isn't an actual lily. So that's why we use scientific names, because this is clearly a different plant than the ironwood.
So Michael, the ironwood, is that a name that you found with other trees, or is that just between these two types?
So far, these are the only two that I know that have ironwood, but I wouldn't be surprised if there are other plants called ironwood out there.
Okay.
But this one's my favorite, and I think it's just a fantastic ornamental planting because it's hard to match how interesting that texture is on the plant. So, we're going to be walking up to our wood memorial garden now. I'd like to take a little time to talk about what bark is, since we've been looking at so much of it. And bark is essentially the outer layer of the plant's stem. As cells within the plant die and they get pushed outward, they kind of form on the outside of that plant. And the outside layer, the bark, is a dead layer. They actually have a layer underneath, the inner bark, that is living. So living means it's got cells that move fluids through it, vascular tissue. But the outside is just a really corky texture because the cells have a lot of cork in them when they die and get pushed outward to form that bark. And as you can see from all the variations in the bark, we've got this, I believe it's a green ash here. Yes, it is. It's a green ash that the bark kind of splits as it grows. And it just really depends on how that tree grows and forms, that there's so many different kinds of bark textures and colors between different trees. And bark is really important because it's kind of for plants like what our skin is for us, in that it protects them and keeps them safe. One of the biggest things that bark provides for a tree is that it helps it retain water, or keeps it from drying out. As you know from our winter adaptations, our winter tree adaptations video, drying out is a real big challenge for plants, especially when water isn't easily available, like when it's really cold. So the bark helps keep plants from drying out because there's less surface area for water to leave that plant in. Additionally, they help protect it from the elements, so from storms, from weather damage, from all of the environmental conditions that are around plants. Having that thick layer of bark really helps them. And I recently learned that trees with thick enough bark can actually survive fires, whereas younger trees that might not have thick enough bark or still growing will be taken by the fire and will be destroyed. So having thicker bark helps really protect that plant and helps it live to maturity. And finally, there are lots of animals out looking for a snack. If you've ever tried to plant a shrub or a sapling and you have deer in the area, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. That plants with thicker bark are much less likely to be eaten by animals because they'd have to bore right through all of that bark. At least in terms of like mammal animals. There's still insect pests like the emerald ash borer that can bore into wood, but for the most part, for a lot of critters like deer and stuff, having thicker bark really helps protect that plant. So bark is protection in so many different ways, kind of like our skin protects us and helps keep us from drying out too. This is our Memorial Grove, another really beautiful, peaceful area. I'd imagine with snow, this silver memorial would be just absolutely stunning. It's really bright too, which I love. On kind of a darker, gloomy day, all the light really catches here and really makes it feel a lot warmer and more inviting. But second to the musclewood, my second favorite tree in the entire garden is the eastern redbud. And these trees are well known for, in the spring, having vivid red buds. They're essentially just a showstopper. But in the fall and winter, they still have a really interesting habit. So you can see, much like the musclewood, how their branches come and they twist and kind of almost spiral around. They also have kind of a zigzag pattern as they get further to the edge. That gives them a lightning bolt shape. But besides just the buds and the interesting form, the actual bark on this is some of the reddest bark I've seen on trees. There's one over there too that has a pretty good shot that you can see too. It's almost got a cherry red, almost rustish pink color that just really stands out. It's hard to find that red of a bark on a woody plant around here, except for maybe something like a dogwood. So for their beautiful form and their amazingly colored bark, I think that the Eastern Redbud is definitely one that's worth checking out. Over here, we've got our Pagoda dogwood. This one was recommended to me by our horticulture staff to check out. Apparently, with snow on them, they are also a real showstopper too. They've got a short spreading form that makes them a really popular ornamental tree, just because they're short, they spread out really well. It's the kind of tree that you'd want to come up and stand under or really be able to enjoy because of how they spread out and just because of their size. These plants have berries on them that are really useful food for animals and birds as well throughout the season. And their name, Alternifolia, hints at something that's really unique for these plants, and that is that they are the only dogwood in our area with alternate leaves, so leaves that kind of go like a ladder, as opposed to the other dogwoods which have opposite leaves, which are next to each other, kind of side by side like wings. But despite the fact that the bark isn't anything special on this, the habit clearly is, and adds a lot of winter interest. Makes for a great landscape planting. Over here we've got a couple more trees. Now we're kind of heading towards the pond trail under the Belvedere. And this tree is one that is really noticeable, and it actually is a request from a viewer out there that they want to learn more about this tree. So I've got to talk about it. I actually had a former teacher who really loved this type of tree too, the white pine. And this is the Japanese white pine, so as the name suggests, it is imported to the US. It is not native here. We do have the white pine, which is native, and both of them have the soft, long 5 needles that you can see here. I really like the coloration on this one too. It's got kind of the yellowing needles a little bit, but they've also kind of got that smoky bluish green color too, which is really beautiful. And one of my favorite things about this tree that I can see right now, just walking past it, are the cones that are on it. I love that the cones are persisting, and they add a lot of contrast, again, with the tree already having a beautiful color. But these are pretty popular ornamental plantings. They come in a lot of different cultivars or different kind of like subtypes, just because of how popular the Japanese white pine is to plant. And they're actually used in bonsai too, which is super cool. They have a bonsai-like look to them as they grow because they kind of have a flattish kind of spreading habit that twists a little bit, and it just makes them look like a bonsai tree when they're growing. It's especially apparent on that one over there with the crooked branch kind of on the side there. It just looks like bonsai planting, and it's a really breathtaking plant, I feel like. So that's the Japanese white pine. Next up, we've got the hackberry, and this is one that I just learned recently over the past few months. It's got extremely distinctive bark. It is a native species. Its wood is used in construction too. And it's hard to describe how the bark looks, but it's just got really, really prominent ridges. The ridges stick out really, really far. So this is the hackberry tree. And this is an ornamental planting. It actually was used in a lot of urban areas after Dutch elm disease claimed the American elm, because this one is really hardy and tolerant of a lot of conditions. And its name, as the name suggests, hackberry, it has berries that last pretty long throughout the season, providing food for a lot of wildlife. I don't see any today, so I assume they're all gone for this one, but it is an important food source for a lot of animals. It's just got the winter interest in this one really is those prominent ridges. I can see it just looking all the way off the tree, how corky those branches are. It is really hard to miss once you get a bead on just what this plant looks like. It's a fantastic tree. And then finally, our last tree, and I stumbled across this one, not even knowing where it was. It is really cool. It's one of the most beautiful trees, I think, is the lace bark pine. And this one I almost don't want to talk for because I feel like it speaks for itself, but I also don't want to be awkwardly quiet either. So this is the lace bark pine, and you can see it's just got amazing bark that just peels off and has different layers of color underneath it. It almost looks kind of like camo, but a lot more elegant than camo. And this pine isn't native to the United States, it's native to China. It was also imported here too. And I've heard, if my research is right, that in China it's used to decorate the grounds of temples. And as it matures, that bark begins peeling and you get layers of white, gray, tan, brown, and even golden. And it's so beautiful. It's also got pretty long, robust needles too that just make for an amazing display. I think the interest in this speaks for itself. Is I noticed this from far away and I'm like, that bark, I have to go see that. So this is the lace bark pine, and interestingly, we're actually at the northernmost point for its range. It wouldn't be cold hardy much further north than we are right now, so it's pretty awesome that this tree is here and able to survive. So those are all the trees I had on my list for today. There's one more I want to give a shout out to behind our grand garden. If you go walk along the cement pathway there are trees planted along, pretty short trees planted along the cement pathway behind the stage. Those are bald cypress trees, and they have amazing like straw-colored peely bark that puts even like the shagbark to shame with how beautiful they are. So go check out the bald cypress trees behind there, and hopefully I've given everyone some awesome ideas on plants to come check out the next time you're here. The winter garden really is its own thing, and while in the summertime a lot of the beautiful bright flowers and leaves catch our eye, there's so much more to appreciate in the subtlety of the winter garden, in appreciating the bark, the forms, the textures. I don't know if everyone's a nerd like me that they love just stopping and staring and appreciating every plant, but I do, and there's so much more to notice. So visit the garden throughout all of the beautiful seasons. Thanks again for joining us, and I hope to see you all next time on Facebook Live.